Welcome back to the Legacy Shift podcast. If you're listening to this, I want to assume something about you. You care deeply about how you parent. You've done the reading, you've done the reflection. You probably said at least once, it stops with me. And still, there are moments where your voice sounds sharper than maybe you intended, or where your body feels like it's tightening, where you react faster than what your values are. And afterward, there's that sinking thought, did I just become my mother? I want to begin there today. The fear that you become her is not proof that you have, it's proof that you're aware. And today, we're going to reframe something that changes everything. When you react in a way that feels old, it isn't regression, it's state regression. You didn't become your mother, your nervous system time traveled. We're going to talk about what that exactly means for you and your body, and how stress narrows access to the parent that you currently know you are. We're also going to talk about how childhood patterns live in psychology, not just in belief, and why shame is the one thing that keeps those patterns alive longer. This isn't about excusing behavior. That's not what this podcast does. It's not about trying harder. It's about understanding capacity because calm is trained. Consistency is a nervous system outcome. And safety always precedes change. So let's get into this week's episode. I don't know about you, but there are several times a week where I say to myself, oh my God, I sound just like my mother, or am I reverting back into how I was raised? And that is just so common, okay? This is a silent fear that a lot of mothers have this day and age, and it doesn't mean that we're reverting back to anything, but that thought of, "Oh my god, I sound just like my mother." It's kind of like a quiet panic that I feel, you know, repeating the things that had happened to me when I was growing up, or having that fear that all the healing that I've done over this last several years in motherhood and my 10 years of experience so far, that it didn't work. Or even the thought sometimes of maybe I didn't change. Maybe I am reliving the same pattern over and over and over again. And it creates this quiet panic within myself. And I'm sharing this because I know that I'm not alone in those feelings. I know that there's so many mothers out there who feel the exact same thing when they're looking at changing patterns and changing cycles and doing the healing. And these little moments creep up, and you ask yourself, am I just like my mother? I just want us to pause there because that is a shame feeling showing up in these moments. And it's quite common, but we're going to pause there because what if that moment wasn't you becoming your mother? But what if your nervous system simply time traveled to a period of time in your life that you remembered very actively, or that is easy to recall because we've talked about in previous episodes how as we continue to develop our nervous system, there's new neural pathways being created, and that takes time and consistency. So sometimes we revert, I'm going to use that word, revert back to a period of time where we don't have to think about the conscious outcome. And let's interrupt that thought of shame and instead introduce one of I'm still healing and I'm still growing and I'm still learning, okay? So it's not about the state that you're in or identity. It's about physiology, not biology. So, and oftentimes when we're not constantly being aware, we're going to revert back to what our body is physically aware of. Understanding this increases our responsibility in those moments. It never excuses the behavior, but it does increase our responsibility because we know better. So we know that, hey, we can react differently next time, but also we can respond to the situation that happened in a very different manner than how we were potentially raised, or how our nervous system would have responded in the past. We've been through this a little bit, but what really happens when we're under stress? When I think of stress, let's just identify what stress means. When I think of stress, I used to think of it as well, I've got a boatload of things to do. I've got all these things to do, and it's very stressful time because I have to manage X, Y, Z, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. And there's other versions of stress, right? Other versions of stress could look like, well, I was very overloaded and I reacted a certain way, or I have all these things coming at me on social media showing me that I have to show up a certain way. And if I don't show up a certain way, I'm not going to be a great mom. That's stress. That's maybe not easily as ideal as I have XYZ to do. I have to do this, 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 and this, right? When we're under stress, things happen in our body. Our heart rate rises, our breath shortens, our blood flow shifts, and access to reasoning narrows a lot in these moments of high stress. So under stress, the nervous system does what? It prioritizes survival over skill. It will prioritize survival in that moment over all of the healing you've done. And this doesn't mean that you lost any of the values that you learned or any of the healing that you learned. You didn't lose access to them, but you are under a period of state regression. So when that is activated, our body drops into earlier understandings. Our nervous system goes back into times and periods of life where our brain doesn't have to really think about outcomes. It's the younger neural wiring. And it's hard to accept and understand. So in those moments that you think, hey, do I sound just like my mother? Am I turning into my mother? It's actually your younger neural wiring coming up into play in the moment of space and time where that's all you knew. Because our capacity decreased, our nervous system decreased, and this is what shows up. Now, like I said earlier in this episode and other episodes, the neural pathways and neural wiring changes with consistency and time. So those will become less and less. The more you feel like you sound like your mother will become less and less, and you'll be able to respond in the new neural pathway of your nervous system as you continue with the consistency. The nervous system defaults to what's most practiced under stress in childhood. And as healing mothers and as conscious mothers, this is what we're working toward. We're working toward a new way of having nervous system defaults, not only for us, but for our children, and creating those generational patterns and those changes and breaking those cycles. That starts with the nervous system and creating a new way of neural being in the nervous system. So it's an important distinction here is that you're not becoming your parent. What was happening is that you were entering a version of yourself from when you were younger. Okay? So I really want to stress that because there's no area for shame in here. We're all doing our best as conscious parents. We're all doing our best to show up in the most regulated ways for our families. We're doing our best to change the cycles and change the generational patterns. And sometimes we're going to go back to those younger ways of being, and that's okay. Let's give ourselves as mothers grace because there's so much coming at us from all different directions, not just family, but like I said, social media, from things you read, from friends, from just social experiences. There's so much coming at us. And in these moments where we're trying our best and doing our best, and we may revert back to those younger moments, it's really important to give yourself grace in those moments and understand that you are under a state regression and a period of stress. And that is how our body will respond in those moments. But you are making change. You are making change. Just even by being here and listening to this podcast episode, you're making so much change and healing and growth, and we're doing it together as mothers in this day and age. Like, you're not alone. We're all here together doing the healing and doing the things. Many of us grew up in homes where emotions may not have been regulated or co-regulated. For instance, let me give an example. So today, in today's day and age, I've got 4 children. Number 5 is on the way. And when my children now are very emotional or have a really big outbreak or need a little bit of extra assistance, I will regulate with them. I will co-regulate with them. That looks like sitting with them, maybe rubbing their leg or rubbing their back, just being with them, letting them express themselves and not shutting down what they are feeling. Okay. So I name what they're feeling, I let them express themselves, and we have conversation about it at a later time to chat about what was going on. I have so many examples of this because, again, with 4 children, you can expect the emotions in my home to run high, constant. It allows our family to run more cohesively, but also allows my children to feel safe in expressing themselves, okay? However, many of us grew up in homes where emotions weren't co-regulated like that. For me, for example, I grew up with, "Oh, you're crying? Be quiet and go to your room. Stop crying," right? And I know I'm not alone in that. That's not co-regulating my emotion, that's making me feel alone in my room, that's making me feel like I have no one to turn to and no one to support me in those moments of self-expression. And later in life, it showed me that I shouldn't be self-expressing myself. I had to heal from that fear of self-expression and expressing myself. We learn in those younger days that in order to survive intensity, we can't soften inside. And that our bodies really store those as survival responses. So now what we're seeing as adults and as mothers ourselves is that these old survival responses are showing up in those times of increased stress and state response. Patterns aren't just beliefs that maybe we have, they are body memories. They are part of our DNA that can be changed. I do want to stress that it can be changed. However, it is part of how we survived in a different period of time in those homes that maybe haven't been co-regulated with emotions. And we're doing our best. So, body memories can come up in a variety of different ways. For instance, a lot of things can trigger these body memories. So, tone, if someone's yelling at me, for example, I'll automatically, start shutting down or be quiet. Defiance triggers control, maybe. Crying triggers shutdown, and chaos triggers anger. So these are some examples of body memories that can live in our body for years and years and years as we continue to make the new neural pathways for our nervous system. So when your child activates you maybe in one of these ways with their tone, their defiance, their crying, it's often not the behavior that triggers us, it's the body remembering what internally we once experienced. So that is what I mean when I talk about the nervous system time traveled. It's traveling back to a period of time where we experienced this, and this is how we were treated in that moment, and now this is what's coming up for us now as adults. Of course, our body is quick to respond, okay? Those are fast responses. They come quick, they come fast at us because our body is quick to respond. And then the logical portion of that follows a little bit of that. So when you respond fast and you feel, hey, did I just time travel? Do I sound like my mom? It's because that's how our body responds. And then the conscious part of us catches up a little bit after, and that's the way that our body works. There is a bit of a difference between pattern repetition and pattern activation. Pattern repetition is when you actively agree with maybe an old behavior, or you try to justify how you showed up at a moment, or you refuse to repair after an outbreak, or you try to double down on whatever that looked like, okay? That's repeating a pattern repetition. Pattern activation is you react and then you automatically feel maybe discomfort in your body. You recognize then that maybe you weren't aligned with how you reacted in that moment. And then you realize you also want to shift it. So there's a very big difference between repeating a pattern and then activating a pattern. What we're doing as conscious mothers today, looking to break cycles and change generational patterns, is pattern activation. And this is a key distinction because the fact that it feels wrong to you is evidence that you're not repeating it, that you're disrupting it right in its path. So yes, you may have reacted a certain way, but you are disrupting it. And that is so powerful, okay? So awareness after the reaction, it's not failure. It's evolution of who you are as a mother, who you are as a being, and the changes of the lineage and the generations that come after you. That's not easy work. The challenge with this is that shame sometimes keeps this pattern alive, right? When you react and then attack yourself, your nervous system stays activated. If you react and you do something and then you talk, well, I just sounded like my mother, or can't believe I did that. I thought it was changing. Your nervous system stays activated. Your body stays in threat. And then the access to those conscious thoughts, it narrows dramatically. So this could sound like shame comes up in a variety of different ways. If you can't identify it, maybe these are some things that you've said that identify that there was shame in that. So things like, I should be better by now, or after all of this work, I'm still doing this, or, and I just like her, and I just like them. Shame is a stress response that's layered on top of stress. It does not increase your capacity to have this extra stress in your body. Here's the responsibility piece, though, that helps to break the shame pattern from continuing to happen. Regulating first, repairing second, and then reflecting third. And that really does help with that shame piece of feeling any underlying shame when you react in a moment. Out of order, if those are out of order, that's kind of when we come back into collapsing our nervous system and increasing that stress response. So again, regulation first, repairing second, and reflecting is third. When you do regulate, your breath slows, your body softens, your access to conscious thoughts widens, and then your perspective returns. And this is why regulation is so key, and why regulation restores your adult self. So your nervous system stops time traveling to a younger period of time, and it restores your adult self. We're not perfect, okay? This is not going to happen instantly, but it's going to happen in increments over time. And that is what is most important, is consistency and incrementally updating our nervous system on a daily basis. I've read a book, I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's called Atomic Habits. And in that book, he talks about making a 1% change every single day. And this is one of those moments that we can really implement that, is we can make a 1% change every single day in how we regulate ourselves and our nervous system. And over a period of 365 days, we've already done 365 degrees different of parenting and showing up and changing our nervous system, consistency and regulation. Cycle breaking isn't about preventing the activation from happening. It's about shortening that recovery time. And that happens when we make that 1% change every single day. And that is where generational change really happens. It is really changing the future for your children, for yourself, and for future generations. Most of us didn't receive repair growing up. I know I didn't, and even now as an adult, I don't receive repair. I've made peace with that as I'm growing on this generational pattern journey. So when you, as a mom or a parent, show up and regulate and return back to your nervous system and acknowledge where you were and reconnect, you're doing something new in your lineage that's never been done before, and that deserves to be celebrated. This could look like, I've got overwhelmed earlier. That wasn't about you. I'm working on staying steady. I care how that felt for you. So it's coming up in those situations after and doing that repair. It's simple, it's clean, it's also not over explaining. Our children just want us to know that we're there to support them, and that we can acknowledge when we make mistakes, right? And that we are working on our nervous system responses. My son always says, like even yesterday, he was like, "Mommy, you just yelled at me." And he has no problem whatsoever calling me out. And I'm like, you know what, bud? I did, and I'm sorry. And in that moment, I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I had a lot of things coming at me. I'm going to try to do better in those situations, and I really care about how you feel. And then he went on his merry little way. And that's the most important thing of motherhood and being a conscious parent and changing cycles, is what happens in that moment. So you're doing something new in your lineage that's never been done before. Repair will always rewrite the memory. So when we repair, it rewrites the memory. If we avoid the repairing, it repeats it. And that's a key distinction that I want you to take away. All right. Before we close, I really want to say something very clearly. So, if this episode felt maybe relieving, or it softened something in you, or if it put language to that quiet fear that you carried along or carried within you, that relief is not accidental. It's understanding your nervous system changes and how you relate to yourself. And how you relate to yourself really changes how you show up for your children, your future children, and your future lineage. But here's what I know, okay? The hardest moment isn't when you're listening to a podcast. This is actually the easy part. It's the 5 minutes after you lose it. It's when your chest is tight, when your thoughts are screaming at you, when shame is really trying to convince you that you have not changed. And that's exactly why I created the regulated mirror. The regulated mirror, it's not advice, it's not a lesson, it's not there to fix you. It's steady, it's grounded, it's the grounded response for the after the reaction, after that overwhelm, after the I know better spiral, right? It's a tool. You can open it and write exactly what happened. Be the human, be messy, be unfiltered. And it will respond to you as the way many of us wish someone had to responded to us growing up. With steadiness, with clarity, and with zero shame. Because sometimes what regulates that's the fastest is being met without attack. So if you want that kind of support, I'm going to link it in the show notes below. It's free, it's private, and you can return to it whenever you need it, as many times as you need it. I just want to remind you, you're not behind. You're actually reorganizing generations. And even when your nervous system time travels, you know how to come back to it. You know how to come back to now. And with that, I will see you in the next episode.